everyone, and welcome to the October meeting of the Climate Resilience Committee. We will get started, as usual, with a statement by Dan Goldberg, City Attorney.
Thank you. Let me pull up the statement. I apologize. This takes a little bit of time, but any person who is a lobbyist pursuant to Chapter 2, Article 6 of the City Code must register with the City Clerk and comply with related city requirements for lobbyists before appearing for the Climate Resilience Committee. A person may not lobby a city official, board member, or staff member until registering. A copy of the code section about lobbyists is available in the City Clerk's office or online at www.munico.com. In accordance with Section 2-888 of the City Code, written notice for this virtual meeting was provided to the City Clerk at least 7 days prior to this virtual meeting. Since this is a virtual meeting as authorized by the Governor of the State of Florida, members of the public wishing to address the body may do so by visiting miamigov.com/virtualboards to submit their written comments via the online comment form. Members of the public may also call 305-250-5351 to provide comments via the dedicated City of Miami public comment voicemail. All comments submitted will be included as part of the public record for this virtual meeting and will be considered by the Climate Resilience Committee prior to any action taken. The Climate Resilience Committee will accommodate any speakers desiring to appear in person, subject to all applicable emergency measures in place to prevent the further spread of COVID-19. Speakers who appear in person will be subject to screening for symptoms of COVID-19. Any person exhibiting any symptoms of COVID-19 will not be permitted to enter City Hall. All interested parties are required to abide by all state, county, and local emergency orders and are urged to remain at home and practice social distancing. If the proposition is being continued or rescheduled, the opportunity to be heard may be at such later date before the Climate Resilience Committee takes action on such proposition. When addressing the Climate Resilience Committee, the member of the public must first state his or her name, his or her address, and what item will be spoken about. When the Climate Resilience Committee takes action or votes on any proposition before it, it shall do so by a roll call vote, which shall be recorded by the board liaison and included in the record. Please silence all cell phones and other noise-making devices. Any person with a disability requiring assistance, auxiliary aids, or services for this meeting may notify the board's liaison. The Climate Resilience Committee is using Zoom to hold its October 5th, 2020 virtual meeting. Zoom is a cloud platform for video and audio conferencing, collaboration, chat, and webinars across mobile devices, desktops, telephones, and room systems. In order to ensure the public has the ability to view the meeting, the Climate Resilience Committee will broadcast the meeting, and the meeting can be viewed live on Miami TV at www.miamigov.com/TV, the city's YouTube channel, and on Comcast Channel 77 within the City of Miami. The broadcast will also have closed captioning. Additionally, the Climate Resilience Committee has not selected a virtual platform that requires the public to purchase or download any additional software or equipment to watch this meeting. Aside from the Zoom platform and the participants will be appearing remotely, the public will have no discernible difference in their ability to watch the meeting. The Climate Resilience Committee has developed several new methods of ensuring public comment for a virtual meeting and has established 2 new options. The first new option allows the public to provide public comments via the dedicated Climate Resilience Committee public comment voicemail by calling 305-250-5351, where the individuals will be able to leave a 2-minute message that will be played during the virtual Climate Resilience Committee meeting. The second new option allows the public to submit comments via the Climate Resilience Committee's online comment form. The comments submitted through the comment form have been distributed to the board members and city staff throughout the day so the Climate Resilience Committee members can consider the comments prior to taking any action. Additionally, the online comment form will remain open during the meeting to accept comments distributed to the Climate Resilience Committee members up until the chairperson closes public comment. For all the aforementioned options, all comments received will be included in the public record of the meeting. For these 2 new options, the Climate Resilience Committee also created a simple set of instructions explaining how the public may submit their comments with either option. Those instructions were provided in the notice to the public and published online at miamigov.com/virtualboards. Additionally, like any other Climate Resilience Committee meeting, the public may provide public comment at City Hall. The Climate Resilience Committee has set up a terminal in the event members of the public travel to City Hall to provide public comments. However, due to COVID-19, all speakers desiring to appear in person will be subject to all applicable emergency measures in place to prevent the further spread of COVID-19. Speakers who appear in person will be subject to screening for symptoms of COVID-19. Any person exhibiting any symptom of COVID-19 will not be permitted to enter City Hall, but will be able to participate through the remote options described above. These 3 public comment options established and provided for the virtual Climate Resilience Committee meeting comply with Section 286.014 and Section 120.54 Florida statutes. The Climate Resilience Committee has published an agenda available upon request, as well as in the notice to the public pursuant to our city code and the items and topics that we discussed at the virtual Climate Resilience Committee meeting. Additionally, the public has been given the opportunity to provide public comment during the meeting at the terminal at City Hall and the online public comment form, and within a reasonable proximity in time before the meeting and during the meeting via public comment voicemail and online public comment form. Moreover, Section 286.0114, subsection 4, subsection C, Florida statutes Specifically authorize the Climate Resilience Committee to prescribe procedures or forms for an individual to use in order to inform the board or commission of a desire to be heard, to indicate his or her support, opposition, or neutrality on a proposition. The Climate Resilience Committee, through its 3 public comment options, provided 3 different procedures and forms to indicate, among other things, his or her support, opposition, or neutrality on an item when the topics to be discussed at the virtual Climate Resilience Committee meeting. The Climate Resilience Committee provided information on how to submit its comments in the notice to the public on a dedicated webpage and via its social media channels. Chairperson, are you comfortable with all the notice provisions set forth in these uniform rules of procedure for this virtual meeting?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Goldberg. So we'll get started with the agenda. And first on the agenda is a roll call. So just to streamline, I'm gonna call you, and if you could introduce yourself, that would be great. We'll start with Robert.
Robert Evia, Emergency Manager, City of Miami.
Thank you. Ronaldo.
Ronaldo Borges, I'm an architect here in town.
Patrick.
Patrick Rinn, I'm an ocean scientist.
Wayne.
Wayne Pathman, Land Use and Zoning Attorney, Pathman Lewis.
Okay, and we are still missing Keelan Bishop and Jose Regalado. So we will proceed. I believe we have a quorum. Is that correct, Mr. Goldberg?
One moment. I believe it's 5, but give me one moment. 1, 2, 3, 4. Give me 1 second. I believe it's a majority of appointed members. I just have to double check and make sure the appointments haven't changed since last I looked. But you can continue while I double check that if you'd like.
Okay, so we can go next to the public comment. Ronaldo, was there any public comment on any of the various venues?
There was no public comment.
Okay, it looks like no one's at City Hall except for the people in that painting. Then the next thing on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. If we have a quorum, we can approve them.
I'll give you an answer in just a moment.
Okay, thanks. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes?
Yes.
Are there any comments on the minutes? I'll just take a moment to thank Ronaldo for the awesome set of minutes that he always provides. So I really appreciate that. It's a lot of work. He's scrolling. We can see you scrolling through.
Just a moment. That's why
I'm pretty sure that there's a quorum.
I'm almost positive as well. I just want to.
Yeah, I think
I check with verify. Minimum of 50% plus 1 of the total voting members is a quorum, and so since there are 7 total voting members, 50% plus 1 would be 5.
Right.
Yeah. So it's 1, 2. We certainly do. I'm sorry. Yes. So you have quorum. And sorry for the delay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So if there are no comments on the minutes, I would like see if someone can move to approve them.
I move to approve the meeting minutes.
Thank you, Ronaldo. There's a second from
Wayne.
Wayne. Thank you. Okay, is anybody opposed to approving the minutes? Okay, hearing no objections, the minutes from the September meeting are approved. Thank you.
And you have two people just joined.
Oh, great. Hi. So back to roll call. We have Keelan and Jose. Keelan, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, Keelan Ashad Bishop, scientist.
Thank you, Jose.
Jose Regalado, member.
Thank you, Jose. And I believe we were just approving the minutes. So did you have any comments on the minutes? We didn't formally approve them yet. I asked if there are any objections to approving them. Do you have any objections, either of you, Jose or Keelan? No? Jose? Okay, hearing no objections, then we will officially approve the minutes with a unanimous approval with all members. Thank you. So now we'll move on to old business and review of action items. The first thing on the agenda was a draft letter to the Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Department. I would like to thank Patrick for drafting a letter, and with input from the committee, we were able to send out the letter to Kevin Linsky from Water and Sewer Department, who wrote back with a very short amount of time agreeing to come to the committee, to the next committee meeting. And it's now on his agenda for the November 2nd meeting. So thank you all. I think that's the beginning of a really good conversation. And please come prepared for a good discussion about the septic issue here in the city of Miami. Does anyone want to comment or have any suggestions on that item before we move on? Okay. Okay, Patrick, go ahead.
Are we gonna have them give them like a time slot where they're gonna be able to present?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect.
We have already asked them for a presentation. So. Okay, thank you. That will be the November meeting. Okay, next thing on our agenda is the formation of a subcommittee on heat. And I added this to the agenda after our discussion that we had last week with a presentation by the Women's Fund and some feedback from Robert on emergency management and how it relates to heat here in Miami. There's a lot of really interesting work going on, I think, in the city. We'll actually hear more about this later with a presentation on Miami Heat Watch project. I think you'll all find really interesting. There's some preliminary data that's interesting. And I think, the way that this committee has moved issues forward is with subcommittees or specific issues forward on using subcommittees so that we can have workshops. And I think it's time, given the level of interest in heat, not only here in Miami, but I think even on a broader scale, of focusing on solutions to heat issues as the temperatures rise everywhere. And some of our solutions that are specific to Miami are going to be very different than they are in other cities where a lot of the heat work has been done focusing on heat waves. And I think it's a really great opportunity to bring together the research community, the government staff, the NGOs, and community members to address this issue and come up with some solutions. So I was going to suggest the formation of a subcommittee on this. And my recommendation would be that subcommittee actually have as its charge to develop a city heat action plan. A number of other cities in various networks that we're involved in, for example, the C40 cities have heat action plans, and ours will look probably pretty different given the issues that we have here. And I think this is a great opportunity, and the time's right to do that. So I'll stop talking and see if there's committee feedback on that proposition. Patrick.
I think it sounds like a great idea, especially after reiterating what you're saying from last committee meeting's presentation. That was really eye-opening, and I think it's a great idea. Very supportive of it.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. Any other comments from the committee? Okay, well, if there are none, I don't know how to interpret that. If that's people are interested, but we can have a vote in order to determine that. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll just pivot to Dan Goldberg. In our bylaws, I don't know if we actually need a vote to form a subcommittee.
Give me a moment to check. I don't think you might need to, because you need to fill it with members. You need to decide who wants to be on it. But let me double check.
While you're looking, I'll ask Wayne I don't know how you did things in the past on forming new subcommittees.
Basically, those that wanted to volunteer, they consisted of 2 or more people. And then the chair, and then we ratified it by a vote. And then they would give, bi-monthly report, every other month reports, bi-monthly reports.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think that having a focus on heat is great. I also think that because we have some empty seats, we're kind of stretching ourselves to capacity. I can't see Jose, so I can't see his face, but I would volunteer the socioeconomics subcommittee to undertake heat for the time being, considering those are likely the people who don't have any refuge from extreme heat. And then we can kind of figure out eventually when we get some new folks on board, if we want to still split that out and how to do so.
Okay, so we would say, I think that's a great suggestion, Keelan. So we wouldn't even need to form a new subcommittee. We would just task the socioeconomic subcommittee to take that on as a focus. I personally am very interested in this topic. I have a lot of research going on, so I'm happy to be involved in that too. And I know that Robert has expressed interest in this issue as well. As always, our subcommittees are open to any of the board members that want to participate. I think we should continue that. But if the 2 of you are the official members of the socioeconomic subcommittee, then it would be, I guess, incumbent on you to set up workshops and to lead that if you want to do that.
And I don't know that we've really had a conversation about how subcommittee meetings work in this virtual environment. So maybe this is an opportunity to either have that conversation or, with everybody's time in mind and respecting it, to pin it and have that conversation sometime in the near future.
Any thoughts on virtual world of subcommittees?
So, real quick, I fully support Keelan's idea about including it in there is a lot of intersects with heat, and fully agree. But on the actual part of meetings virtually, I believe even if the governor's order is set to expire at the end of October, seeing as it's just a sunshine meeting, that we can continue. We just can't vote, which is fine because we report back on our findings into the full committee. Dan, is there any objection to that?
No, that's generally correct. The only thing that's changed with the governor's executive orders is that a quorum, which before had to be established by physical presence at a location, can be done virtually. So could you do basically a virtual workshop of a subcommittee? I believe so, because the subcommittees, as I recall, I was able to find a draft version of the bylaws. I apologize. It's all subject to ratification, I think, of the full board. So I think subcommittee should be fine. I will verify that prior to the next meeting. I think a meeting of subcommittees where you're not voting on anything, a subcommittee is perfectly fine as long as it's noticed and we have the access to it like we have here. As far as voting as a subcommittee to bring something to the committee, I'd have to find out. I think you'd be fine too. It's just a matter of noticing it, but I will let everyone know. I'll let Ray and everyone know with specifics.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay. Okay, so were there any other comments? So a next step, I would say, is it possible to set up a workshop of that committee to get this work going?
Yeah, Jose and I can have a conversation about scheduling through Ray, and then also loop in, other interested committee members, but specifically probably you and Robert. That's cool.
Right. That would be great.
Yeah, definitely. Just in follow-up to our last meeting, I did meet with women from the Women's Fund, and we set up a follow-up meeting with communications, with the Department of Health, and we've established a kickoff of some type of campaign for next May. The last Friday in May is Heat Awareness Day. So that's undergoing. So if this subcommittee has information and we can work together so that there's one cohesive message coming from the city and one cohesive plan, that would be great. So I'd like to be included on all of those meetings if possible. Is there a chair of the subcommittee? Is Kilan the chair of the subcommittee, or you guys share it?
I am.
Okay, all right. So I'll look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much. I'd love to be involved too. I think there's a lot of really interesting research related to vulnerability to heat going on in the universities, and can bring that to bear in terms of our decision making or recommendations to the city.
If I could also point out, in August, the city of Miami joined the Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance, and that's a global initiative that we're working on to address the heat challenges. It's still forming under the Adrian R. Resilience Center, but it definitely has some potential to bring some new ideas and concepts to the city that we can help to implement.
Great. Thank you, Alan. It's really exciting. Very timely, I think all of this is. Great. Okay, so an action item then, Jose and Kilan will come up with a date for a workshop and loop in the rest of the committee, and we will take it from there. Thanks, everybody. All right, so next on our agenda are presentations, and our first presentation is from Suleiman, who is already, yes, on the line and should be a co-host. This will be on the Stormwater Master Plan update.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm here to give you a overall timeline progress update on the Stormwater Master Plan. A more detailed technical update will be done at a later date, but I just want to come here today and just show you where we are in terms of of timeline. The Stormwater Master Plan had about 4 tasks. Task A was data gathering analysis, and surveying, and that has been completed a while back. And this summer, we just completed also Task B, which is the stormwater modeling phase. Currently, the Task C is a sea level rise evaluation and considerations. Part of that was seawall and surge analysis, which was already completed. And currently, they're running different assumptions on the sea level rise based on the model that they just updated and completed. And that's in the progress right now. They also have commenced on Task D, which is the Capital Improvements Program phase. And this is going to be what they're going to recommend to the city as CIP. They are running right now cost estimates and prioritization, et cetera, et cetera. We are hoping to get a draft by the end of this year, which is going to influence also what projects we are going to fund for the Miami Forever Bond, which we are currently in process of identifying projects which are going to be recommended to the City Commission for approval. And it's just going to be very short, so that really concludes my presentation on the Stormwater Master Plan and where we are.
Thank you, Suleiman. Do we have questions, comments, feedback for Suleiman at this stage? Patrick?
I think we had talked in the spring about the value of having a meeting with the engineering firm, that we always felt like when they came and spoke, that we ended up having some more questions than we could have time to answer. And I think it could have been pre-pandemic, and then everything got challenging.
Sometime back in March, I think, or prior to that.
Yeah. Do we have anything scheduled to have them come and present to us more like kind of big picture overview?
No, absolutely, and that's what I referred in the beginning. that a more detailed presentation will be done by the consultant, the CDM Smith, who's doing the update of the stormwater master plan. And that's when I don't know, Alan, I don't know what type of format you want them to come over here, whether you want to do a workshop like they did in the past, but virtual, of course. Or if we get to meet in person later on the year, that's up to the board how they want us to present.
I think they're going to come up with a lot of recommendations on ways to redesign and rebuild the stormwater infrastructure, but it's all based on that model, which is extremely complex. And I think that is where some of your expertise could really come into play as to how it's telling us what changes we need to make for the future. Do you agree with that model or not? And then as we're looking at the capital improvements portion, there's going to be recommendations on prioritization because you can't build everything at once. And so looking probably into how they're recommending certain features are constructed sooner and which ones can be put off to later.
Do we have like a estimate in terms of a date or a month we were thinking of trying to get together to have those discussions?
I think the later towards the end of the year will be better for us.
Yeah, I would recommend the December meeting because we should be close to a draft report at that time and the modeling will be complete.
I agree.
I think that would be great. My only tip would be for us to try to keep that agenda pretty lean because those tend to initiate a lot of really interesting discussions.
Yes, I totally agree. And the question is, I mean, I don't know what's on our agenda yet for December, but in the past, I will echo what you were saying, Patrick. It's been kind of frustrating because we didn't have enough time to really dive into issues together. And I wonder if it's worth dedicating a workshop to it separately, or if we can, I mean, there's a lot of meeting business that takes up, I mean, it's hard to get it down to less than, I would say, at 45 minutes of just regular meeting business that has to take place. So that leave, at most an hour and 15. Is that enough? If we did nothing else except just regular business. Marginal, yeah. Okay, why don't we make a decision then in November based on what we'll try to have a draft look at the December agenda in November and in early November and see whether it's necessary to have a separate workshop.
Got a quick question in?
Yes, yeah, go ahead, Ronaldo.
So on the budgeting side, Samelian, have you had any feedback from the consultant on sort of the budgeting, the scoping out of the stormwater master plan at this point? Is it too early? Have they started?
They literally just started right now, and they are in process of the CIP cost estimates for what they're going to recommend. So I think on this upcoming meeting, they're going to have a better answers to your questions in terms of like the costing that they're thinking of. They're going to propose.
So in order of magnitude, there's no number that they're sharing with you at the moment.
Yeah, not yet. They're still working on that. They're hesitant to tell us yet. They say they're still working on the modeling to show what improvement they're going to recommend, and based on that, they're going to look at the scope, and then they're going to come up with the cost estimate.
Very well.
Is there any other feedback from the committee on this? Okay. So we will hear back from them in December, either in the regular committee meeting or in a workshop to be determined.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Suleiman. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a visitor, Irela Bagay, who is on the line, and she is the chair of the Biscayne Bay Task Force and here to present their recommendations. Thank you so much, Irela, for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm also joined by Dr. Tiffany Troxler from FIU, who will be providing more detail on the water quality aspects of our report. There she is. I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'll just, if I think I'm able to share my screen, right, guys?
Should be able to.
All right. Let's see where it is. Here it is. Can you all see it now?
Not yet.
Okay. How's that?
Thank you.
Okay, great. So just to give some background, the Miami-Dade County Commission formed the Biscayne Bay Task Force back in June of 2019. This had been years in the making, from a call to action from the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Summit that was held back in 2017. The resolution was introduced by Commissioner Rebecca Sosa, and this task force basically was charged with developing a report to improve the health of Biscayne Bay. And I don't think I need to go into what's been happening. I think it's been very visual in the last couple of weeks, what's been happening to Biscayne Bay. The alarm had been sounded for quite some time. But nevertheless, we held approximately 18 public meetings. We heard 35 presentations from experts from the federal government, state government, municipalities, including the city of Miami. Thank you, Alan, for that presentation. And also academia, environmental organizations, and the public at large. And we focused on 7 policy themes, but we wanted to couch it under an overarching structure, because what we found was that there were a lot of cities and state government and the county, and everyone was doing a lot of things for the Bay, but no one was really coordinating it in a way where we could see results. So we recommended an overarching structure to really form a watershed management board that would be also managed by a chief bay officer that would basically live in the office of the mayor to coordinate internally and also externally all of the actions that are being taken. Again, we were let me see, there we go. So we focused on the report, 60 recommendations, and we focused on different themes, obviously water quality being the main one that we focused, but we also addressed infrastructure, governance, watershed habitat and natural infrastructure, marine debris, education and outreach, which is critical, and funding, obviously, because we need to figure out a way to pay for all these things. We, of course, like I said before, could not have predicted that our report would coincide these horrible fish kills that we've all seen and the algal blooms that came subsequently after that. But what it did was it actually helped give the spotlight and the attention to our report. So as bad as that was, it really, put the Bay on the map, and our recommendations have now looks like they're being fast tracked, and they're being really addressed by the county right away. So since our report was presented, I want to show you some of the actions that have been taken. They've passed a state of emergency that we've been asking for years. We have a fertilizer ordinance coming to tomorrow's meeting, and that was one of the recommendations in our report. The Chief Bay Officer has been budgeted for, and there will be a report by the mayor tomorrow discussing how that position will interact with the internal governance of the county, but as with other external folks as well, including an implementation plan and what that's going to look like and how that's going to coincide with the existing work of the county, DERM, water and sewer, and other departments that deal with these issues. Obviously, there's still a lot of work to be done, but I wanted to point out the resolution that's also on tomorrow's agenda that focuses on the cost share for municipalities in efforts. And so it's a coordinated approach, and that I expect will be one of the MOUs in our local agreements that will probably be required once the Chief Bay Officer starts his or her work. To make sure that we're all collaborating and also paying our fair share for what we're doing. So again, this is just a snapshot of what's going on, but we're very pleased with the actions that have been taken to date. Clearly, they're not waiting to hire the Chief Bay Officer to implement a lot of these recommendations. And I don't know if you all have seen the report, but what we did as a task force was we tried to make it as easy for the county commission as possible to implement some of these recommendations. Primarily, the color-coded chart at a glance that we put together showing what could be done immediately and internally with the data and the funding that we have now. What obviously is going to require partnerships and more funding sources and so forth, but it kind of gave them a good roadmap and path forward. And so we're really pleased with the, the progress that's being made so quickly. With that, I think pretty much I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany to go over some of the water quality aspects of our recommendations. And she was instrumental in helping us draft those. And I'm very grateful to her and her expertise. One thing I also wanted to mention is a pending report that for whatever reason has been stuck in the administration. And this one is the Biscayne Bay report card that Commissioner Cava had asked for quite some time. It's still not there. And then there's a couple of other reports that are still stuck, like the septic report that identified where the real hotspots are. And I know that you all are engaged in that conversation as well. So with that, I'm just going to end my presentation and kick it over to Tiffany.
Cool. Thanks, Arella. Hi, everybody. Okay, I'll give you some slides also. All right, so can you guys hear me all right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so as Arella mentioned, we had a significant emphasis on water quality in the task force report. And fundamentally, water quality, one of the other aspects of the approach that we took is focusing on the watershed rather than just Biscayne Bay itself in terms of generating those recommendations. Because what we understand about how Biscayne Bay has changed over time is that it's not just, the dredging and the filling and, activities on the bay that have changed the way that water circulates and the way in which it's able to assimilate nutrients that get into the bay, but it's also all of the changes that have happened around the watershed that feeds into Biscayne Bay. And as we all know, this is stormwater infrastructure. It's in some locations likely septic systems are contributing. There's residential activities that contribute, just the way that there are a number of things, and Alan Dodd can, I'm sure, ad nauseum tell us all the things that Public Works does every day to try to manage stormwater systems to reduce pollutant loads. But all of those factors contribute to nutrient loading within Biscayne Bay. So it's not only how the bay itself is operating and functioning, it's how we've changed the watershed that drains Biscayne Bay. And so in areas, what has been observed is that we've got a system that historically was very nutrient limited, primarily by phosphorus, just like the Everglades is super sensitive to phosphorus, so is Biscayne Bay. And as nutrient loading has increased over time, We get a lot of, algae in the water, which limits the growth of seagrass, and ultimately you get this transformation from a seagrass-dominated system that can support marine life and all the ecosystem services that we appreciate here, that supported by a clean water or supporting a clean water economy, to one that is limited seagrass cover, more phytoplankton concentrated in the water column. And when you lose the seagrass, the system becomes even more vulnerable to changes that it's exposed to. And this slide is just to illustrate that there have been a number of warning signs over time that have been reported. In 1998 was a seagrass die-off that was reported for the 79th Street Basin. There have been a number of seagrass die-offs since then. Also incidents of anadiamine macroalgal blooms. And we also have a nice publication that was published by NOAA scientists showing that nutrient conditions, chlorophyll conditions, is not limited to the North Bay. Conditions that are indicating a degraded system. It's not limited to the North Bay. It's basically all along the nearshore environment from the top to the bottom of Biscayne Bay. So indicating that the nutrient pollution problem is marching its way southward. And this is just an example of some of the information that we do have available to us. So this is the Little River Basin, and in the context of is that there are no nutrient criteria for canals. It's only for the bay water, the bay sites themselves. But the water that's been coming out of Little River for the last 20 years, the phosphorus and at least the phosphorus for the last 20 years has exceeded that criteria for Biscayne Bay, and for nitrogen in the last 10 years. So we know that there is a nutrient problem associated with that specific waterway. I don't have other ones here, but the same thing could be done for all of our waterways to identify where our most significant issues are. So this is what we're looking at. Our task force report was focused on trying to dial this back, to try to reduce holistically those the sources of nutrient pollution, to try to bring some of that filtration capacity that used to exist in our watershed, bring that back into the system, fix infrastructure. So it's not one single solution. All of these things we're going to need to make progress on all of these things. And we're going to need to achieve deeper nutrient reduction loads in order to create an environment in Biscayne Bay that can support seagrass. So we have to control the nutrient pollution before we can restore the seagrass. And without having the seagrass, and the element of this is that we're managing the bay right now, not for thinking about what the next extreme event is going to be, or we're not managing for episodic canal discharges or infrastructure failures. We're managing it at the bare minimum that is set by nutrient criteria that were already based on a degraded system. So we have to be thinking more about more protective management for Biscayne Bay rather than just meeting the minimum criteria if we're going to be able to manage it in the long term, manage the resource in the long term. I think that's, so if you guys want to dig into some of the water quality recommendations, we do have them here. And that's, essentially what the task force report is intended to be, just a roadmap so that, the Watershed Management Board and can work to develop a watershed restoration plan with, to dive into, more specificity on how these things are going to be implemented. And as Arella mentioned, the funding that is needed to implement them. So, so how do you guys want to take a deep dive, or you want to ask questions about things in particular?
Is this the last slide?
Yeah, so these are the specific water quality recommendations. And then there are the infrastructure, is that what it is? Yeah, the infrastructure recommendations are broken down into different infrastructure elements, septic system, sanitary sewer, stormwater, and governance in terms of policy around infrastructure. And then there are a number of natural system, watershed habitat and restoration and natural infrastructure recommendations. So these are all water quality related recommendations, fundamentally.
Well, let's.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, let's maybe if you want to leave some of those up, that we can read through them. And as we're reading through, are there questions from the committee? Comments, feedback?
I have one. So, thank you. Dr. Troxler, you mentioned that right before you finished how we shouldn't just look at basic compliance at the bare minimum.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have an idea of what level we should be looking for?
Well, I mean, my first answer would be we should be striving to meet the minimum criteria first. And we know what those are. Those are the criteria that are set by FDEP. And as I mentioned, they're for Biscayne Bay sites, not necessarily the canals, but if you want to keep nutrients out of the bay, you need to think about what's in the canals. But there is some information, for example, when it was Briseno and Boyer that put together a report for FDEP, and they identified protective criteria, and then they identified, it's not a minimum level, but it was the less stringent of the two criteria that were presented. So there are protective criteria that are already available that we could be looking at. And secondarily, understanding the maximum loads that Biscayne Bay can manage is another approach. And, that involves more regulation, which, may not be the best way to go. What we want are results, not necessarily more regulation. But if we need more regulation to get there, then, Does that answer your question, Jose?
May I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
So thank you, Virela and Tiffany, for all the work you guys are doing for our bay. I was able to listen in on Friday to the forum that you guys put together, and it was very informative. My concern is that a lot of the data and a lot of the analysis and understanding what's happening to the health of our bay is based on and kind of like the status quo of where we're at right now, right? So it doesn't at times look into that future of increased water capacity, storm events, and continued urbanization of this coastal city. So, at times I get really concerned about that, that additional load that we will put on Biscayne Bay as we continue to grow. And also, I would suppose, and this is more of a question for city staff that are looking at the stormwater master plan, that we're going to learn more about its final status towards the end of the year, beginning of next year, is, how do we start to understand that when we solve one problem, sometimes we create other problems. And so it's kind of like a futurism question, right? It's like, how do we start to get a handle of that future of increase runoff, from a city that will continue to have greater and greater events on the rain side, on the storm side, and in a city that basically is used to draining itself to Biscayne Bay. So, I mean, at some point, we're gonna, when Tiffany, you talk about the maximum load approach to this thing, the reality is that, it's gonna be kind of complex and difficult to manage that if we continue to be a city that, welcomes development and expansion and urbanization and densification and all these things. So it's kind of like an interesting question for us, to kind of tackle that future. It's kind of complex. So I'm not really sure if I'm asking you a question or making a statement or both, but I guess where my concern is.
Yeah, I would just offer that we grow smarter.
Where applicable, right? I think that's part of one of the issues that we have is that you have zoning regulations that are through municipalities and otherwise. And it's an interesting issue also with heat. This is for a later conversation, where you find the heat is also from that map that we saw, even in lower income neighborhoods, it wasn't that bad, but mostly due to their zoning, that they had space, they had trees. So yeah, I think it's, the Little River bisects Hialeah and a few other places that are very urban. That I think it's one of the things that maybe we can consider monitoring the canals in the areas, and then we try and we have to figure out, where does it come from? Is it stemming from areas in the city of Miami that we can police, or is it areas that are elsewhere?
Well, if I may, it's just another reason why we called for that overarching recommendation to create a coordinated and unified approach to this, because otherwise, city could be doing great things, and if the county's not engaged or if the state is not engaged, then we're not really moving anything forward. So again, it's kind of an all hands on deck approach to this, and we're, honestly, I'm pleasantly surprised that our report has received all the attention that it has. Obviously, the fish kill, shone a spotlight on that, but nevertheless, there are recommendations here that some cities are already moving forward within our report. So that's also a good sign. So again, keep in mind and stay engaged. Tomorrow's will be an interesting meeting, because the mayor will be basically endorsing, so to speak, the work of the task force, and also setting the stage for that internal collaboration, which really didn't exist. They're basically elevating Biscayne Bay like they did with sea level rise across departments. So that's very encouraging, because water quality, just kind of land use, for example, we were just talking about that. So there's parts of the system, depending, that nutrient levels are going to be higher depending on the land use in that area. So it kind of, again, it's a very coordinated approach to this. But again, things are moving forward, and we're happy about that.
That's great, Rella, and thank you so much to both of you. I wanted to ask, I see a lot of recommendations are appropriately at the county level, but are there things that you can, off the top of your head, can point us to that are things that could happen at the city level here, city of Miami level?
Well, sure. For example, just stormwater. I mean, just with that, and tying some of our recommendations into now this stormwater master plan, which, full disclosure, I'm working on that project too. So, I had to actually recuse myself when Colonel Dodd came to present on the task force. But for example, there's an opportunity right there to take a look at how some of these recommendations can play into that that plan.
Yeah, I would also mention, I think the city of Miami has its own NPDS permit. So, we also understand that our NPDS permitting is not, our best management practices may not be working that well. And if we do a little bit more due diligence about checking whether those best management practices that we expect to be working, whether they're working or not, that could also be something that's very specific to a city like Miami that, if I understand correctly, has its own discharge permit.
Maybe this is a time to pivot to Alan and say, I know you're very well coordinated with what Biscayne Bay Task Force has done, and are there things that you think that this committee can help move forward in the city level in support of these recommendations?
Well, I think there are a lot of things in play right now as far as Biscayne Bay, all good things. Probably the most important is getting a governance structure in place that we can unite on. It can provide direction. And when we do have issues like the fish kill, we have a government entity to facilitate the state, federal partners, and all of the municipalities. The pollution and stuff going into Biscayne Bay doesn't just come from the waterfront properties and the water and the cities that are on the water. It's coming from all the way inland because everything gets into the canals and the waterway. So we really do need that regional approach. But every city has to do its part. And for us, the Stormwater Master Plan is going to drive us towards projects to provide inlet protection, filtering, and reducing the speed that the water is flowing through the pipes. That cuts down on the turbidity that is so much of a problem. We have to get a better handle on fertilizers and other pollutants getting into the system. We passed our fertilizer ordinance last year. The county is doing the same. And passing an ordinance is just the first step. Then you got to get people to recognize that it exists and they start complying with it. And we've been doing a lot of public campaigns to deal with that. The last month to 2 months, we've had a huge problem with discharges going into the bay from construction sites. And we are taking greater steps to enforce the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System requirements in the city. We have inspectors who are out on the weekends now, and as soon as we are getting a report, we're sending people to figure out where it's coming from. And they're getting hit with heavy fines, but it doesn't seem to be enough. It doesn't stop the sediment from flowing. So now what we're doing is once they receive an NOV, they are going to have to clean the system, and we're going to get other parts of the city involved as well. You'll see at the next commission meeting or one coming up, more discussion by the commissioners. Jose, do you want to?
Yeah, it will be I believe it will be in the next commission meeting. Exactly what you're talking about.
Right. To give us more enforcement capabilities within the city staff beyond just giving an NOV. Because that a contractor is worried about, he's burning through $200,000 of construction costs a day. Paying a $200 fine or a $1,000 fine doesn't really impact them so much. So we're looking at other means to really force them to improve the quality of the protection that they're giving to the stormwater system and cut down on those illicit discharges. And I do need to point out also, in our budget that was just approved, the mayor recommended, he proposed $280,000 towards inlet protection. It was picked up in the budget between the first and the second versions, and we'll be moving forward with that project, which will be implemented in the downtown area over the next year.
Right. And that's a perfect example of what cities can be doing.
I got a quick question. It's okay. I really like a great presentation. I'm curious, in your work in the task force, have you identified any example municipalities that have struggled with this issue in a similar sense, like a city that's near an embayment that had to deal with nutrient loading and water quality issues, and looked at how they addressed it, and sort of like case studies of people in the past that have succeeded at tackling this versus maybe those that have struggled with it, and identifying what are the key strategies that have worked in the past for others?
Well, the model that we used that, we kind of structured everything around was Tampa Bay. So that they presented, we even structured the way that this water management board would be structured, very similar to how they're structured, right? So, we recommended obviously an overarching board with all the agencies, and then technical advisory boards and committees underneath them, community advisory boards underneath them, nutrient reduction committees underneath them, so that those committees is really where the work is done, and then they are prioritizing projects and making recommendations to the watershed board. And then those entities that serve on that board obviously will have the capacity to provide funding and to also participate as partners with moving those forward. But really, Tampa Bay was the model that we focused on primarily.
Yeah, and that's based on a National Estuary Program model. And so it's through Environmental Protection Agency. And they also, because they have a National Estuary designation, they have access to $650,000 a year for that work. So we could get some action to get an established Biscayne Bay estuary. That would be helpful.
Right, but that would take obviously some congressional action, and we know how slow that could be these days. So in the meantime,
right, that's something to wait for. That's for sure. Yeah.
In the meantime, we have to move forward and as creatively as possible, and this was the best we could do with the time we had.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
Hi, Arella. Hi, Tiffany. Hope you're well. Haven't seen you guys in a long time. Is there a septic moratorium, do you know, or can you still add septic tanks to your properties in Miami-Dade County?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Go to.
Is there a moratorium, or you can still add septic?
No, there is no moratorium.
Okay.
No moratorium.
So if you can add septic, and there are pump programs that cities in the county have employed where they discharge into the bay, and I asked Alan about this, I think, at our last meeting, how do you proceed with all these good ideas and changing water quality and everything when there are other programs that are counterintuitive to this and will impact the bay as you try to clean it up? How do you put the cart before the horse here? It seems like there has to be participation from all cities within the county that share the bay to take action along the lines of what you've presented tonight in order to accomplish the goal. If not, it just seems like you're just climbing this mountain uphill the entire time, and you won't the things that you've outlined if there are not steps taken to stop the impact to the bay by other actions that the county is either allowing or is taking to try to reduce other impacts like flooding. Has that been discussed?
Yeah, it was discussed, and in our governance structure, we do include the participation of municipalities. So, I mean, again, we're late. This is it. So, I mean, it either everyone gets on board, or I know it's gonna take time to even see the reduction targets that we want to see. But again, yeah, you're right. Coastal communities are the ones that have to come on and work together. And again, understanding that the watershed is quite large, and the issues that are happening, or that the issues we have in the northern part of the system look very different than what the southern part of the system look like. So you have to take that into account as well. But yeah, we again, we're encouraging all of our cities to take a look at this report, because again, there's things that could be being implemented as we move forward.
Yeah, and I would also offer that if we're going to make all these investments in climate adaptation and resilience, that we make sure that water quality mitigation is part of that. Otherwise, what you're forecasting will play out.
So Alan, Miami is the biggest city in the county. What can we do as a committee and get our commission to do to take action to support not just passing something, but to make some kind of commitment to reduce impacts to the Bay to increase water quality?
Okay, I think the majority of the recommendations that we'll be able to act on will come in the Stormwater Master Plan, because it's not just about the CIP projects, but it also redefines what the standards are for anything that we're building. And a lot of the pipes, the stormwater system, was not designed with environmental quality in mind. It was only designed looking at it from a drainage point of view. And we have to change that in anything we build from this point. And then we have to go in and start retrofitting the existing systems with vortex devices and other features that will capture debris, pollutants, sediments before they get discharged to the bay. As Suleiman said, we're not quite ready to present it to you, but in that next discussion that we have with them, I think the standards that are captured in that need to become ratified as the new city standard for stormwater are so important to achieving the long-term goals. We can do pinpoint projects and talk about that all day long, but we need to do it holistically, and that has to happen through the Stormwater Master Plan.
And also, again, land use planning. Don't forget that. That's critical. Again, the hot spots. If you look at where, the heavy land use is where you're going to have the problems. Miami River, for example, there's a recommendation to partner with the Miami River Commission in order to really take a hard look at the water quality and the industrial issues of water quality that go on in that on that river. And heightened enforcement is also something that we'd like to see. So there's a number of, take a look when you have some time to read, but the at a glance at the back just kind of is a great way to kind of review the report, and then you can take a deeper dive. A lot of our infrastructure recommendations deal mainly with our aging infrastructure and the consent decree that the county's involved with. And we're recommending a significant amount of investments in expediting on asset management. If we don't know where the vulnerable assets are, then that's where we have to start first, right? We have to identify where the critical pipes are, and then, start rehabbing those immediately. So those are just a sample of a couple of recommendations that, using LiDAR technology to kind of really pinpoint where the problems are. Just those things that we should be doing already that we haven't done.
And one thing, if I can also add on to this, is it's a lot easier to identify problems than to fix them, because there's a financial component of that. And everything we're talking about here does cost money. So I would say looking holistically at the city and are we investing enough or not? When we start looking at what this master plan is, you can implement it in 10 years or you can implement it in 30 years, depending on how much money you have available. So figure out where the right balance is in order to put some of these changes in place.
Yeah, I just want to put something in perspective, because I've been hearing a lot lately in forums about using Y-green, that type of approach to septic to sewer connections. And I just want to just put that out there that, yeah, there are other creative financing opportunities, and you guys have a bond that you can probably leverage with the private sector. and come up with some creative solutions should you have to go that route. Y Green is something that would have to, PACE program would have to be opened up in Tallahassee. Those things would have to be brought into it. I doubt that's even going to happen. So just want to kind of put that out there, that there are other vehicles and other public-private partnerships that we can engage in to address some of those private property connection fees.
Jose, yeah.
I just wanted to pull on the thread because Wayne brought up a very good point as far as banning a practice that we know has an issue, even though maybe new septic tanks are much more improved. But from my knowledge, municipalities, and I don't know, Alan, if this is even more of a question for building, but can we ban septic tanks, or is that solely county?
You can't ban them because the water and sewer department is a county department. And so if you don't allow a septic tank to be there, that means you have to provide a force main system or some other means to provide for their wastewater needs.
What we did recommend was inspections of existing units. So that's something that the Blue Green Task Force at the state level didn't even, they recommended it, but the state legislature didn't agree to that. We want to see that.
But what would be the penalty for, I guess, lack of compliance when it came to septic tanks, and would there be support for, bringing them up to code, if that's the proper language?
Well, I think there would have to be, obviously that's the job of the chief bay officer or the county at some point to figure out how that is done and established. But I think a lot of education needs to happen around all of this so that folks actually know how to manage their systems. But I like to say, let's start with the most vulnerable areas first, where we know what the science is leading us, where those are the hot spots, and then deal with that in a pilot kind of way, and then scale it to another level.
Well, I would also offer that one of the recommendations was to get all of the septic systems that are currently could connect, and they're just not connecting because of cost or but those are illegal, and that at least I know other municipalities have followed up on that with the county to identify what those parcels are and do some outreach at the very least, understand how much that would cost to get those individual parcels on connected. I mean, that could be a good first step.
Thank you for bringing that up. We actually have Kevin Linsky coming to our next meeting, and that's one of the questions that we're looking forward to a discussion with him about where in the city are some of those low-hanging fruit. So that is, we will take that step. Thanks for bringing that up to me.
They are moving forward with commercial areas, but again, they need to deal with the residential as well.
And I also just want to thank you both because before you came on, we were talking about the stormwater master plan, and we're going to have a report from them in December. And I think it's really useful to have this kind of side-by-side look at, what is that plan really going to help advance some of the things that you're recommending. And so we should be looking at that. I'm looking at the committee and Alan as well, that we should be looking at the stormwater master plan with that lens. I think at least, including that as a way of evaluating the priorities and the actions and how they're impacting Bay. Patrick, last comment, because we have two of our next visitors right on the line already.
It's sort of just following up on kind of what Wayne was saying. I think it's a really interesting topic when you talk about pollution because of the interconnectivity between neighbors. So right now we're talking city to a neighboring city, city versus county. But then there's what's so unique about Florida is one of many things, the intercoastal kind of connects all of us. And this is really sort of, I would say it's a statewide issue. And that I wonder if there are exciting opportunities to try to make this more of a statewide thing. When countries try to opt into reducing their pollution, right? If one country is reducing their pollution into the atmosphere, but the neighboring country isn't, it's the same kind of problem. You really have to build unity across a whole region. And I wonder if there's opportunities to do that within the state of Florida, and kind of building on this idea of connectivity because of the intercoastal waterway, because everything is connected. That might be an exciting opportunity to build on your knowledge that's been applied just to Biscayne Bay and with our huge city, and expand it to maybe a mission that we really try to embrace statewide.
Well, we gave a similar presentation to the regional planning councils recently because they were very interested in what we were doing with the Bay. And of course, Broward is having similar problems with their aging infrastructure and sea level rise, and very similar. So, I mean, it makes sense to address some of these issues more collectively. So, I mean, I think there's a lot going on regionally. We were pleased that the Secretary of Department of Environmental Protection came out and pretty much supported the efforts that we've taken with this report and the recommendations, and has pretty much volunteered to step up and serve on on our watershed management board already, and potentially bring some funding to the work we've done. So it's encouraging. I think the work of the Blue-Green Task Force at the state level also addressed how similar the entire state is. We have water quality issues everywhere, whether it's an estuary or a spring, and similar problems, and they're all land-based. So we have to address it before it gets into the system. It's a challenge.
Thank you both so much for a great presentation, great discussion, and look forward to continuing this discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Rella. Next on our agenda is a presentation by two visitors who are already here, Vivek Shandas and Joey Williams from Kappa Strategies, and they're going to talk about their Miami Heat Watch survey and some initial results. So welcome, Vivek and Joey. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you, everybody. It's great to be here. Alyssa, did you want to say anything ahead of time just to kind of frame it up?
Yes, so I'll introduce kind of the overview of the initiative, and then I'll hand it off to Joey and Vivek to get into the nitty gritty. So you can hear me well?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Sometimes my mic is funky. So just to preface kind of what we're talking about here is the city of Miami worked with Kappa Strategies, Catalyst Miami, and NOAA on this project that they've been working on called Heat Watch, wherein they get citizen scientist volunteers to attach this sensor to their cars. They drive around a certain track of the city, and it collects ambient heat and humidity data, which then Kappa Strategies takes and turns into a heat map for the entire city. So they've worked with, Richmond, Virginia, and Arizona, and Los Angeles, and tons of other cities in the country. So we're one of a cohort of cities who have participated in this project. We had citizen scientists, volunteers engaged in June and July of this year. Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach also did this last year, and we were supposed to do this last year, but things got crazy, so we ended up doing it this year, and it was actually great because we were able to really engage our volunteers in a great way and do multiple days of data collection. So they're going to be speaking about one particular day of data collection that we did in mid-June, and just the idea of presenting it to you all today is just to get your initial feedback and to give you all some time to further digest it and give us your deeper analysis. This is just the first draft of this. So, us internally are going to be looking it over and all those things as well to come up with a final product. And the final product is going to be A, this report, and B, a GIS layer that we can use to kind of go into a bit more details and analyze with other things that the city is doing. So, and then before I hand it off to Vivek and Joey, I just wanted to mention again that we had a lot of help coordinating volunteers, recruiting volunteers with Catalyst Miami. We paid the volunteers to participate through a stipend. They had to commit to 3 hours of driving plus driving to their locations and training. So it was, you know, it was work, but the volunteers were great, and they all said that they really enjoyed being part of the process. So we had a really great team. So I wanted to just say, you know, if any of the volunteers are watching, thank you very much for being a part of this project, and thank you again to Catalyst and especially Myra Cruz for helping us, you know, bring this whole project together. So with that, I will hand it off to Vivek and Joey from Cap.
Great, thanks, Alyssa. And I'll just tee it up for Joey. He's going to have some slides to share, but we're going from water, so shifting your minds from from water to fire here. And so I'm going to cover a lot of the elements in this presentation, but really part of what we want to do is three things. One is to just let you know, that this happened and this was an amazing process. We actually are just showing a snapshot of the data, and Joey will talk about the kind of breadth of data that we were able to collect over multiple days, thanks to Alyssa, Myra, and the Catalyst team. And so the second thing is essentially to give you an opportunity to provide feedback, and then of course to be able to navigate to where these reports and data do sit, because they might be of relevance to water governance topics that you're covering, and we could do a multi-hazard approach to some of the climate resiliency work that you're all involved with. So Joey, you want to share your screen and go through some of the slides that just a very few. We're not going to take you through the holiday vacation that we took around the block, but this is just a very straightforward, I think, hopefully accessible few slides that we have to share.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Vivek. Can everyone hear and see me? See the slides here? Cool. Yeah, so Alyssa gave a great overview on the effort. Essentially, we, on June 27th, 2020, had our volunteer teams together to drive our data collection sensors here, as you see, mounted on a passenger vehicle through 9 sub-areas of Miami, which we designed to include a diversity of land covers with each one of those sub-areas. So that as volunteers drive, the equipment is picking up the temperature signal of what's the heat and humidity like near a shaded residential area? What's the heat and humidity in a commercial parking lot? What's it in a downtown area where there may be lots of tall buildings cooling things off? And so Alyssa and Myra were really awesome at recruiting the team, getting them excited for the project, and getting them organized and trained for these campaign days. And what we're looking for on the campaign days is clear skies and high temperatures. And as you can imagine, in Miami, that was oftentimes a tough set of conditions to exactly nail. But we feel like we had a good set of those on the 27th. So those are kind of the main maps that we're focusing on. And there were several other traverses done on different days under slightly different conditions that offer some interesting insights as well. And like Alyssa mentioned, kind of more on that to come. So as you see here, we've got 2 of our participants, a driver navigator team. They're driving their pre-planned routes at 6 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, and 7 in the evening to give us kind of a picture of how the heat changes throughout the day in Miami. And in total, really impressive effort of over 60,000 unique measurements of temperature and humidity at the human level. So what we get back are the sensors and the data, and we're able to drop these into a GIS, and this is now available on web map, and see this distribution of temperature points. And so throughout the city, we can see kind of traverses winding in and out of neighborhoods, across parks, and up to the coastal area, and into downtown, on all different neighborhoods, all different land covers at 3 times throughout the day. And so we can really kind of see some distribution and change as we go through a neighborhood. And what our system is able to do is to essentially take these points, look at the associated land covers using satellite imagery, and then make some predictions of the area-wide heat across the area. So what I'll show you briefly here is the web app that we put together. Let me share a new screen here. And this is essentially showing this full screen. Yeah. So this is essentially showing here the distribution in between the points. It's not an interpolation method. It's using satellite imagery and machine learning to predict at each cell across the area what the predicted temperature and heat index should be based on the humidity collected. So the way we look at these maps, we tend to look across the full area, think of some regional reasons why we might see cooler neighborhood versus a warmer neighborhood, and also thinking about these throughout the day. So this is the afternoon predictions. And then we might also zoom into a particular neighborhood and look at, say, why is it cooler along a commercial avenue, like along Flagler Street here, and what might be happening over by a more shaded part of the city, a park, a residential street near a park, and we can start to see these differences spatially. And then we can also look at these differences as time goes on throughout the day. So some kind of temporal explanations and descriptions of how heat is distributed in Miami on a hot day. So we've got these results up for general public to view. You can type in address, kind of change the base map. We also have our GIS map, web map that is more focused on, say, if someone wanted to bring in the GIS layers on ArcMap Online, or take another look at them with some other layers of information. They're able to do that. It's all publicly accessible data sets, as well as a summary report that describes the full efforts as we've discussed here today, as well as some initial observations, how we look at the distribution, as I was mentioning, and then a description of the analytical processes. So, as Alyssa mentioned, there were a few other days of data collected, and we have yet to dig into those, but we hope that these are a good starting place for understanding how heat varies temporally, spatially, as I mentioned, and also some examples of how to kind of understand and sink your teeth into these maps a bit. So Vivek, anything else you want to mention here? The effort or results?
No, as just to underscore the fact that this is just one day that we're showing, and we have the advantage of having multiple days. So as meteorology changes, we really see how these variations do change over time. So there are some days where only afternoons, the community volunteers were only able to go out in the afternoon and evening, other days where they're only able to go out in the morning, and vice versa. So there's some variation. This was a day where we had all three of the morning, afternoon, evening, so it really made sense to bring it together into one map. And I tend to use some of these maps as almost like Rorschach examples, where this one looks a lot like a bird to me. It looks a lot like a cockatoo. I never thought of Miami as that, but there are some really interesting, beyond that, there are some really interesting patterns that when you zoom into specific streets, you can see at the street level specific changes that are happening from the street and adjacent neighborhoods, and the models that we use really pick up on a lot of that. Turn my video back on. But we want to just open this up, and we can zoom into specific areas, dig into any aspect of this. We can, Alyssa has all the data now, so I don't know if you want to think about a process for bringing the team together and talking about them more specifically, or what this might mean for other projects you have underway. But yeah, we're open to a conversation about where you might like to take this, what we might do with questions that you have, and how we can kind of help to support some of the climate resiliency activities specific to urban heat in the region. So we'll leave it at that for now, unless, Joey, do you have another slide? Anything else you wanted to? Okay.
Thank you both so much. That was really interesting. And I'll just say I was trying to Google Heat Watch Miami to get to your ArcGIS site, but I can't get through all the Miami heat news to find it. So
yeah, there was a lot. There was a lot of
Miami heat news, but it's not about heat. It's not about temperature. So committee, do we have feedback, questions, comments for Alyssa and team?
I also, again, just want to underscore again that this is a first draft. So, what we're seeing right now, this graph that's here right now, that's a map, rather, it's not a graph. We are hoping to ourselves, the people on this committee, to poke and prod, ask questions. If something you're seeing, you want something explained, why is the heat like this here and not there? Please ask those questions so we can dig in.
Patrick.
So I'll ask exactly that. That very cool region just east of 95, but below the call out area. What is that?
It's, Alyssa, you want to get into this? We had a conversation earlier today about it.
Isn't that Overtown?
So yeah, Myra and I were kind of expressing the same thing. So that area is roughly like the Wynwood area. I guess, can you go back, Vivek, so we can like look at or Joey rather?
Isn't that Overtown?
Yeah, it's like, it comes out, it's like the Overtown Wynwood type area. And then there's a little blue area above that. And when you zoom in further, you see that it's like Wynwood below 20th Street. And then the other blue area is above 29th Street. So yeah, exactly what they're showing right now. So when Vivek was looking into it, that area above 29th Street is actually kind of residential. So you see a lot more trees. In the Overtown area and the Wynwood area, Vivek was saying because he's seeing a lot of vacant lots that are just grass, it might have produced a cooling effect. That is a hypothesis.
Yeah.
Are you seeing the same trend with your other days data?
We haven't gotten into the other data in the level of scrutiny that we've done with these data, and that is exactly what we're doing. We wanted to get this out as a first cut to you all to just start kind of pouring over them, and we want to spend, when we're a little bit off of this kind of peak analytical mode that we're in right now, in November, I think our plan is to really dig into that. November, December are basically going to be months that will be looking at these in a lot more detail and trying to figure out whether we do see that change. If, for example, there's a lot more wind on another day where the data were collected, or if there's more clouds, or if there's only morning versus, differences across days, differences across meteorology, basically is what we want to kind of array them up against and see if we're seeing similar patterns. Because if we do, then we're really going to be pretty conclusive with some of these results, because we really don't have this kind of range of data that we have for other cities where we've done this. I will note we're seeing similar patterns, like downtown being cooler in cases. It's surprisingly consistent across a lot of the cities that we've done this in, and it corroborates other studies that use different techniques have found similar results as well.
Yeah, so Joey just changed the map to show the evening. So you see there's a little bit of a shift to where the cool area is. So there's 3 different maps that are in the report. There's a morning map, an evening map, and an afternoon map. So they have 3 different kind of looks. this one you can see that the cool has shifted more towards the downtown area, but throughout the 3 periods of day, as Vivek was saying, you know, the not so much Brickell, but kind of more the downtown Overtown area did seem kind of cool, which was surprising.
You know, it's really interesting that, and I don't know why, maybe you guys can talk more, because we give the reasoning for Wynwood because of shaded, wide areas that are shaded, but the roads right bisecting 3rd Avenue and 11th is a hotspot. The same thing with Silver Bluff, which is also a heavily, has, in this area, not including the Grove, these 2 areas for both District 3 and District 4 have some of the most tree coverage in the entire district. And they're hotspots. Shenandoah as well. I mean, I know the Pines is bad, but it makes sense, right? You have very large blocks, longer than I think most of, at least in the area, where you have multifamily that paves the entire road and parks on the side. We only have drainage. There's very little trees. So that makes sense to me. Doesn't make sense the other ones.
Did you note that, Joey? I think that's something we want to look at, specifically those neighborhoods.
For sure, yeah. We'll jot those down and take a closer look.
I'm looking at the heat index modeling. That's where I'm going from. I mean, the evening it's a non-issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. A little bit different picture with taking humidity into account. So yeah, we'll have to take a little bit closer look here, try and make some associations with the land covers like you're suggesting, and see what we can include.
I would just want to add, I think this kind of work is really tremendous. And the fact that it's like hitting on a lot of things that I think are really good. You're involving the community with citizen science, which is excellent. And I think the way you're presenting your data is very intriguing. It's very interesting. And then also being able to circle back with your citizen science and community, it's a great opportunity to get people engaged with their city and understanding the larger scale dynamics of what's going on. And I think this kind of data-driven assessments are so valuable when we're talking about adaptation action areas and whether or not we want to put in increased green infrastructure to, increase the, drainage capacity in a neighborhood, and then also see if maybe that'll affect the temperature. There's no way for us to know if that will work unless we're getting snapshots of the way the city was prior to a project and then a snapshot after. So I think this type of work is really, really important. And I think it's excellent. It's tricky, and I'm sure Amy could comment on this more. It's more up her alley. But one hard thing with like looking at data is you can almost like squint your eyes and convince yourself of any trend. I mean, if you can say, there's trees there, there's this. I mean, it's easy to kind of guide yourself either way. But so she might have some more advice about how to reduce our intrinsic bias when assessing data. But I just want to applaud the effort, and I think it's really, really good. And I'd love to see more of it.
Yes. Yeah, definitely good work.
I would jump in and say I had like a long list of questions. We could maybe go offline, but you have a lot of experience doing this in other cities, and so overlays of greenness. I mean, I think you've done that in other places, right? And I do think that a lot of the common understanding about heat that comes from other cities, it may not be applicable here, and it's something that we're struggling with, I think, as a community, of how do we think about solutions and mitigation for heat. My specific question was 3 days of data. Obviously it's hard to control for meteorology, even with like 30 years of data, because meteorology is so noisy. So one is how do you deal with that? And also, but the point that Patrick was making about, evolving with time is do you prepare cities to be able to kind of have an ongoing monitoring system, whether with the machine learning techniques or the satellite data or even repeat transects with cars?
Joey, you want me to take that?
Yeah, sure.
Sure, I'll start with it. Maybe those are great questions, Amy, and thanks, Patrick. That's really helpful to hear. We're always trying to improve this process, and and Miami for sure was one of those places where we ran this in Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach last year. We were really humbled by how incredibly complicated, and that's why with Alyssa and Jane Gilbert, when we really started these conversations, we were saying, our experience from last year suggested that we need multiple days. We're not, generally what we do is we send out equipment. It's like a in and out kind of thing. But this, we knew we wanted to keep the equipment there for a long period of time. And that's exactly what we did. It allowed for a lot more flexibility and engagement and discussion. And so that really proved effective. In terms of meteorology, that's where we want to go for the next couple of months. We want to really see if these patterns hold out, and we're going to be working with a few meteorologists, in fact, to be able to look at the differences in days, some of the key variables that might be affecting convective currents, for example, in some areas, affecting relative humidity in other areas, affecting offshore breeze, etc. And then also cloud cover, to the extent that which different days had varying amounts of cloud cover over this particular stretch of South Florida. I mean, like, how is it that we can do it? Often meteorology works at the 300-meter grid cell, and we're working at the 10-meter grid cell. So there's some issues of commensurability in terms of data, though that's something we're going to flag and try to kind of do the best we can from a data science point of view. In terms of timing, so I don't have a direct answer for you yet, Amy, but it's forthcoming. And we'll be in conversation with Alyssa as our point person about where that goes. In terms of timing, the next, I've learned, I don't know much about this, but I've learned through Alyssa and others that there are a whole bunch of iButtons and various other kind of stationary sensors that have been put around the city. And so one of the amazing things we want to explore with that is the extent to which our kind of spatially exhaustive campaign can be coupled with a temporally rich campaign where you're able to see the diurnal profile of one or a few warm days in July and June, July, and how you can kind of get that to speak to some of the temporal variation we're seeing over time, which then could couple with the meteorology that we're also talking about. So I know, or I suspect those data are available for the time period we've got these. We conducted these data, or we collect. You all collected these data. So maybe I'd love to continue that conversation because it's an area that's just blowing up right now.
I'll just say that one of the things that we have, we placed iButtons in next to your routes. So Alyssa helped coordinate that. So and one of the things that we noticed with previous iButton deployments was that a much larger range of maximum temperatures than what I'm seeing here.
Yeah.
Like a range that was more like, it was even within some of these red and orange areas, there could be 10-degree temperature differences in maximum temperature. But it will be interesting to put that all together.
Yeah. And I might just comment on that real quick, is that we do see when we look at satellite imagery, we do see, for example, a much wider range of temperatures. And that's partly just because you're picking up on the actual land surface temperature, the skin temperature, as opposed to 2 meters or 3 meters above the ground, when it allows for some of that kind of movement of air and even cooling that happens between even just 2 meters of space.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's another piece I think that's really worthwhile to dig into. And I know there are local resources like FIU and others that might be worth checking in on for master's thesis or other things that could be digging into that a bit more. But you have all the data now, and we cleaned it all. We kind of did a bunch of diagnostics on them to make sure it's kind of the essential set that really defines the space and the temperatures. Joey, anything to add to the meteorology or other timing questions?
Yeah, no, I think that's it. With speaking with some forecasters about trying to get some snapshots of the conditions on the day would be really helpful to the team, and then other ways of potentially combining these data sets to kind of coalesce around some hot and cool spots might be a direction. But yeah, more to come on this, I'd say. And one other thing would be, kind of looking at this within some smaller neighborhoods might be helpful to see more differentiation. These are just classified by 10 natural breaks, and so see a little bit distortion between neighborhoods. But I think it's helpful when you really can kind of narrow your view to one neighborhood at a time.
I just wanted to say, from the data collection standpoint, Amy, you're kind of talking about what days, or usually in the places that are doing it in one and done days, the way that they typically run this is they get the volunteers and they're like, okay, plan it a week in advance. We're going to go out on Wednesday. Wednesday is going to be perfect conditions. It obviously doesn't work here. So we tried to recruit volunteers and basically told them, keep your weekends open. We coordinated with them via WhatsApp, and I tried to do it 2 days in advance, and that was even too much notice. So by the end of the campaign, I was just telling people like, hey, we're going to go out when we can, and I'll give you a heads up an hour and a half beforehand if we're going out. And they were super, super flexible with me by the end, and everyone was being really responsive. But we really had to make judgment calls that quickly because, the weather just changes so much here. So it made it interesting.
Yeah, hats off to you, Alyssa, for quick action and communication. That was definitely impressive effort.
So much for that. Other questions, comments from the committee? Maybe one more comment, because we're getting near the end of our allotted time here.
Amy, I had one question for the whole committee, which was in regards to getting feedback from you all, how you wanted to go about that, how you all wanted to give comments and stuff, and if you need any other information besides the report that I sent.
The report, and I think, does the report also have the data links?
Joey and Vivek, is that on the site that you sent me the link to?
Not yet, but I will add it to that site where, links to everything else. Yeah.
Patrick.
Only it's sort of a question for the whole committee is, it gets me thinking about how we connect the dots between a hypothesis or an observation to an action. And so say we say, okay, we identify neighborhoods that are getting really hot, and we hypothesize why that is. And then we have an idea of what could be done in terms of infrastructure to fix that problem. There seems to be a disconnect between the beginning stage and then the final stage of implementation. And I know the city can't be conducting experiments, but this has always been something that's sort of eaten at me, is how do we answer these questions in the specificity of Miami, so then we can guide our decisions. And specifically, I'm thinking about heat and thinking about water retention with green infrastructure, adaptation action areas. How can we take knowledge and observations like this and take it to the next step, which we're actually testing a concept that will then become an engineering solution? I'm not sure what the answer is to that. I'm curious if anyone has some thoughts.
Well, for a lot of that requires funding. However, there are recommendations that this committee can bring to City Commission based on, and us having support. So, for instance, the Freeboard ordinance, right, that we brought to task. So I don't know. I think a lot of what we can do as a city and a municipality is our zoning. That's and then enforcement of that zoning. And that can be where we're requiring, I think I've mentioned this before, kind of a high reflectivity on our roofs for even repairs, right? Something that we require high reflectivity on new construction, but nothing on the old construction. And that may be one of the cases of the reason that the roads in Shenandoah and Silver Bluff is hotter, because they have concrete and tile roofs, not metal roofs, because they're all kind of repaired because they can. Because all those homes are from the 1940s, 1920s, etc. So those are the type of things, and unfortunately these are like incremental and hard to do. So unless we get another organization like this one to help us, and we get involved with universities, and echo what Keelan has mentioned before, kind of we're kind of loaded with everything. So we have our toolkit, and when we see someone else do something, we should support them.
I wonder if there's opportunities within our parks and green spaces to, because they're sort of more versatile than other spaces, to identify two regions that are relatively similar, and then allow one to become sort of experimental in ideas and monitor the changes. That's always been, I love the idea of using green spaces as sort of a versatile tool that the city can use to answer certain questions, because obviously doing this in commercial or residential areas loaded with difficulties.
We should look at Jose Marti, because it's doing both both of those things in their plan, and I don't know what the status of that is in terms of monitoring, but for these pre and post intervention monitoring. But we do have a Vivek and Joey, this is a park on Miami River, which is there's a plan to do a pretty significant, really innovative plant design for it in terms of water retention. And I don't know if I'm sure shade is part of it for various reasons, design and landscaping and water retention, but maybe there are also heat impacts that can be quantifiable. So yeah, we should definitely think about that. Great. Well, so we look forward to seeing the final report, and we'll have an opportunity to play with the data. And I think, Alyssa, to respond to your question of feedback, I do think that we should certainly keep. We can do that by email. If we can reply to the report that you sent us with specific questions by email through Ray.
Okay, yeah, and if there's any interest in, setting up a workshop or, a phone call with Joey and Vivek in the future, they're open to that. At least I hope you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, just you all let me know how you as a committee want to review this. If it's just, send me your feedback, that's fine. If it's we're diving that, also great. We're the city staff level, we'll be doing, some analysis on our own as well.
Right.
I'll just say that we're spending probably, on the order of 12 hours a day thinking about heat these days, even in the depths of winter, which doesn't get maybe that cold for you all, but even when it's cold for all of us in different parts of the northern latitudes, we're still spending a lot of time, particularly focusing on the mitigation question. So that's where we're getting most of the questions. That's where we're getting most of the kind of responsiveness on this. So it's like, okay, you have some maps, so now, so what? And so that's where we've been doing a lot of modeling of, using computational fluid dynamics models to look at different interventions and how well they work. We're exploring we're exploring different interventions in different contexts in terms of land use and redevelopment that's happening in cities. So lean on us as it's needed. I mean, I'll leave it with that.
I'll just say again, thank you so much for coming to our city and helping out with this. And we look forward to next steps and future discussions. And it was actually really nice to meet you because I've read a bunch of your papers today. So
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, great. Thanks. Yeah, it's great. You all, fantastic. I had a doctoral student in my job at the university. I had a doctoral student do her entire dissertation on Miami and climate, and it was probably interviewed many of you. She's not able to tell me because of human subjects protocol. Probably interviewed some of you in this committee and otherwise on that.
Send us her thesis so we can look at it.
Okay, if you want to read 350 pages, I'm happy to. Yeah, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate a chance to come in and drop a few maps on you.
Great. Thanks to both of you and Alyssa too. Thank you. Okay, we have one more item on the agenda, which is we now have a standing item here on Resilience Action Group, and turn to our committee member, Jose, and Alan Dodd are both members of the Resilience Action Committee. Ask you to keep us updated how that group is proceeding, and if there's any kind of engagement that we need to have on a deeper level with them.
So we went over the different plans, but also more importantly, Alan, is it okay to mention the forum?
I was going to bring it up, so go ahead.
Yeah, because it seems to be that's actually one of it removes the issue. So the mayor will have a climate forum and invite everybody, and it'll be a sunshine meeting. And well, I'll defer to Alan for the specific details. I have them in front of me.
Okay, so we should be coming out with the announcement hopefully this week, but it will be the Mayor's Resilience Action Forum, which will be open to the public. It will be a virtual meeting where anybody can come in. The mayor can talk a little bit about his priorities and what he is focusing on. We can respond specifically to any requests for information. So in the first one, we'll probably give an overview of where we're going with the greenhouse gas mitigation plan. But then about half of the meeting will be reserved for exchange, dialogue back and forth with the public. And we think that it's going to be a little chaotic as we're trying to get the protocols in place when you have an open forum. But 2 minutes of public comment is not satisfying the needs of some of our residents. So this is another opportunity to have some exchange, some dialogue. The first one is scheduled for October 27th at 3 p.m. And we will do it every month on the last week of the month at that same general time.
So is this replacing the Resilience Action Group?
It's not replacing it. The Resilience Action Group is an internal staff group that we're having, but this will be going over the same topics the Resilient Action Group is talking about, and they will all be part of it as well.
Right.
But it's to open it up for not only for you all, but for everybody in the public who is really wanting to get more involved with what we're doing in the city.
Amy, I also want to mention, I think there's some confusion because the mayor had, in speaking with, all of the climate advocates that come and speak with us when he was talking to them about the budget, use the term Resilience Action Group when speaking to them. So there was this confusion over, isn't it an external thing, an internal thing? So just to be explicitly clear, the Resilience Action Group is an internal committee that we have with the city. And then now we are creating this forum as a public-facing external dialogue.
That will have all of the members of the Resilience Action Group in it, as well as the mayor.
And it'll be sunshined, so we can all comment.
That's great for public outreach, but it doesn't. The reason that this came up was that because the resilience actions are now there's a different structure for anything related to resiliency, and there were a lot of questions that came up in our meeting about how can we make sure that this that all these activities are going to keep moving forward in the way that they have been. And the answer was that this resilience action group will be doing that. if I understood that correctly from the city manager. And so my question was, are we able to actually track the work of that resilience action group? And so your answer is that they'll be reporting to the public on their activities, or is it I guess I'm not really sure that's going to be really the right forum for achieving what I was suggesting.
I believe in the meeting that we had, Dr. Ihikwaba said that the Resilience Action Group, our internal working group, would be open to the members of here if you wanted to participate in that.
Right.
Okay. However, the public wants the same type of information about what is going on. And that's why we created this Resilience Action Forum, was to have the same information, but present it in an open forum. But if you want to participate in the Resilience Action Group, I will send you the invites to those as well.
Well, I can't because of sunshine. So that's why I said we put this on the agenda so that you guys could report back to us, because we can't go to that.
Right. And I believe at the last meeting we had, I don't have the agenda in front of me, basically.
I do. I mean, it's similar to the things that we've already mentioned, and the things that the mayor wants to go over in this first forum. But it was the update, which we give out to the public and send out. So the press release, the reviewing of that press release, and proofreading, editing. We mentioned the forum and what format it would be, and kind of the purpose of the forum.
Okay.
We spoke about the greenhouse mitigation plan, and I believe it was actually of the signing of the contractor and kind of the upcoming first meeting. Has it gone through the different levels administratively, through procurement, etc. We spoke about the Biscayne Bay Task Force and the actual report and what we think it means for the city. But that, I think at that point it just came out. So it was sharing it so we can digest it. And there was grants. So we spoke about any upcoming grants that were possible for both, the name escapes me right now, waterfront, Florida Inland Navigation fine grants. It was for fine grants or anything other, heat was a question. And then we have status updates for the information campaign for the fertilizer ordinance, the resilient safety program that Alyssa was heading, and Melissa Hugh was in the information campaign for the fertilizer ordinance. And then the building efficiency 305 ordinance, which is still ongoing, and we're having meetings about at least a couple times a week, it feels like, and that's going to be going through building. And this happened right before budget, so we were talking about the budget and kind of what are the implications of that for the proposed budget, and if the proposed budget wasn't accepted, what effects would happen.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
No, thank you. That not from me. Does the committee have any other questions for Jose or Alan or on this topic? Patrick.
More just a comment. I think I applaud the idea. I think it's a admirable idea to open this up as a publicly facing thing, and to hear the mayor is going to participate monthly in that. I think that's a step in the right direction. So that's good to hear.
And I just want to understand, Amy, when you say like you want to be able to monitor the activities of that group, do you mean like having a regular agenda item on our agendas where, they would like report out, or are you thinking something more like a quick email? Like what?
I had been thinking agenda item like this, so I think it's useful to hear from Jose, what that group is doing, and to make sure that, we have some sort of synergy, or they're taking on things that we are completely unaware of, or vice versa, or so I think to create synergy between that group, because that group is, is going to be basically supporting. My understanding of the way that they described it is that that group is really going to be helping Alan move this whole shit forward. And so just like we would hear from Jane and staff on a regular basis, and we hear from Alan on a regular basis, I think hearing from that group on a regular basis through, let's say, Alan and Jose, that we can keep on, sort of keep, everybody knows what the other is working on. That's my idea. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's fine. I mean, if we were to pass another resolution, would this body be where it would go versus like a city manager's office? Would that make kind of like more sense to have this kind of be like our working arm, or is that too much or like out of the scope of the reason that this group was established?
So not to speak for Alan, but I can say as far as the charter goes, and Dan can hop in, I think the advisory role is strictly to the city manager or to the commission. There is no, there could be a direction. You could, I don't see why not. It would be, because it goes to Alan eventually. Right. But even then, there's no directing of a city employee from an advisory or otherwise. So elected official staff, advisory, you can't tell an employee of the city to complete this, even by reso.
Right. And definitely wasn't thinking in terms of like giving directions, more thinking of like a way to have a productive working relationship with this body.
Yeah. Well, that's a question for you, I guess, maybe Jose, is as things move forward, do you see, how do you see the relationship between this committee and that body? I mean, just something to be thinking about. Right now, what I'm suggesting is that it's basically a one-way reporting kind of relationship where you're telling us what they're doing. But is there, what I think Keelan is suggesting is that there might be more of a two-way interaction that might be useful or serve the purposes of advancing these issues.
Not to speak for the administration, I'm just speaking as a member. What I can say is that it is an internal group, and there's already now, we can already give direction, ask the Department of Resilience and Public Works to do something, as well as reso to the city commission. And there's now the new mayor, the mayor is getting involved with his own forum. So I don't know how it'd be. And it's also not my group. It's more, not to kick it to the CRO, but.
My view is, we have a forum with the CRC. We're now creating a forum with the public, but we also need an internal forum to work within the staff and to have a discussion with the city manager and the assistant city managers about what we're working on and the coordination that needs to happen before we have the discussion with you and with the public. I mean, we have to have that type of a ability as well. That's what the Resilience Action Group was for, was to do that internal coordination. And then when we bring it out to the public, it would be at the CRC or at the Resilience Action Forum.
Right.
And all three of them are focused on the same priorities. Yeah. And right now, we're talking the same water quality issues, Biscayne Bay, greenhouse gas emissions. That's what we're talking about, the Resilience Action Forum. And that's what a lot of what we're coordinating in the Resilience Action Group.
Okay, well, I mean, so it sounds like what you're saying is that so there's no need for coordination, or do you not think it's useful to report just to this committee about the topics that are covered there?
I believe that as part of the staff update, we brief you on the topics that we are working on. That is on the agenda.
Mhm.
It's the topics that we are coordinating in the Resilience Action Group. And I do think that is coordinating. If the intent is to have oversight of all of the meetings that we have in city staff, then, and we have to start worrying about sunshine laws and things like that, then it makes it much more difficult for us to do our internal staff coordination. So I'd rather have on that line where it says staff updates, that's what we brief you on any of the initiatives that we are working on.
Okay.
And that's really, I think, the best way for us to, our priorities and where we're focusing our efforts on that time at that month.
Okay. Well, I mean, the list that we got from Jose, I think was useful to hear that. And I mean, we can put that under staff updates. That's fine too. I don't think anyone's suggesting that this committee needs to oversee internal processes. It's just a way to make sure that we're coordinated with the kind of things that are going on there. And if you want to do that through staff updates, that's fine also.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Okay, that's your preference. That's fine with me. Is anyone else? Okay, so then the next agenda, so we'll move the Resilience Action Group under staff updates, and in the next meeting for November. Okay, public comment. Have any public comments come in, Ronaldo?
There's one.
I do have in there, I think we still have the, as far as staff updates, a couple things that I do need to present to you.
Oh, okay. They're not on the agenda though, but all right. Well, so this is a good time to do that then. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so, okay, let me pull up my notes here. Okay, we already talked the Mayor's Resilience Action Forum, October 27th at 3:00. On October 22nd, there's 2 ordinances that will be going in front of the commission that you need to be aware of. The first one is on solar. It's a revision to the city codes that will clarify how solar equipment is installed and will make it easier for people to install solar equipment, which helps us towards getting towards our greenhouse gas reduction strategies. The second one is an ordinance on electrical vehicle infrastructure that will require installation of infrastructure in parking garages and parking areas where charging stations can be installed. And so that one will, again, help us towards getting towards those goals.
Great. I think we did pass a resolution on the electric vehicle ordinance here. So back in the spring or in January. I can't remember when. So great that that's coming for the commission. Thank you.
And then next month, we'll give you an update on the carbon mitigation plan, when the public meetings will be, and also an update on the Building Efficiency 305 initiative.
In the next CRC.
At the next meeting, I'll bring you an update on those 2.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Anything else from the staff? Thanks, Alan. Okay, Ronaldo, public comment.
Yes, there was one public comment that came in during the meeting.
Okay.
You want me to read it or just send it to the?
Can you read it within 2 minutes?
Try, yeah.
It's kind of late in the evening, but.
All right, it's from Aaron DeMaio. Hi, CRC, good to see you all, even digitally. I wanted to make a comment to you all about an important mobility/transportation infrastructure project. The SMART plan contains the Northeast Corridor, which runs parallel to Biscayne Boulevard, with proposed stations within the city of Miami limits. There is a current proposal for stations in Little River/El Portal Design District and Wynwood Edgewater Midtown. As I understand, the first station heading north from Miami Central would either be in Wynwood Edgewater Midtown at approximately 27th to 29th Street, or in Design District on 39th Street. However, not both locations. The Wynwood Midtown Edgewater area is projected to grow in population at 5 times the rate of the Design District over the next 20 years. There are multiple reports that have been created from top local urban planning firms that show the 27th Street location is clearly the best location both now for the existing communities and based on future growth. As far as sustainability and resiliency, creating shared mobility infrastructure on high ground to encourage dense development and thus walkable communities is an important aspect of resiliency for many reasons. This includes reducing car trips, less carbon output, less traffic, fewer pollutants from cars going onto our roads and then going into the bay, less heat output from car engines, allowing less parking to be built by reducing construction costs, fewer materials used, and allowing more affordable rents. Building on higher ground for smart for our long-term resilience, reduced insurance costs, etc. Offering more mobility options for one of the existing most dense neighborhoods in South Florida. Higher quality of life, allowing more healthy transportation alternatives, walking and biking, and more. I encourage you all to look at the information on the Northeast Corridor proposed stations. If you agree with these experts' analysis, it may be good to show your support for the Wynwood Midtown Edgewater Station location.
Okay, thank you. So we'll make sure that everyone gets a copy of that so they can go look at that, and committee members can go look at that information online. Okay. Apologize for going over today, but we are finally at the adjourn stage of the agenda. So could I have a meeting to adjourn? Oh, Patrick, yes.
Just a really quick note. Tomorrow morning, the county is voting on their fertilizer ordinance that I think we're all very supportive of. And it's a virtual meeting and you can participate in public comment. And I encourage everybody watching and other board members to participate in that, support that ordinance, because obviously it's aligned with our city's strategy and we want to see it happen.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay, with that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Okay. Jose, second.
Second.
Wayne, and anyone opposed? Okay, thanks everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Stay healthy.
Thank you,
Stay
too.
safe. See you in November.